Brodie Lee, or as WWE fans would know him as, Luke Harper, is finally a free agent. So you know what that means. I'm John from the Midcard Maniacs, and today we are going to fantasy book how Brodie Lee should debut in AEW. Yep. If word on the internet is true and Brodie Lee is going to sign with AEW, then I would imagine his first debut is going to be on the March 18th show in Rochester, New York. It just makes the most sense because his 90-day no-compete clause is going to be done, and most importantly, it's his hometown, which potentially could draw a couple of issues. There's gonna be no heat on him because everyone's excited to have this wrestler be himself and be in a new ring. Another thing to watch out for is that when Brodie Lee debuts, he can't have that WWE guy feel to him like other wrestlers have had in the past when they debuted for Impact Wrestling or TNA at the time. Thankfully for guys like Moxley, Spears, Hager, Pac, when they debuted in AEW, they didn't have this stigma. They were their own characters, they were fresh, they were new, and they brought something to the table that we all wanted as fans and something they've wanted to do for a long time. So hopefully, when Lee debuts, it's going to be fresh and it's going to be something we're looking forward to. But before we get started, let's have a little backstory as to who Brodie Lee actually is, because a lot of you know him as Luke Harper from the WWE. And when Harper was wrestling for the WWE, he had tons of potential. It was just the WWE didn't use him properly. The thing with Harper is he's always been a great tag team wrestler. He was great in the Wyatt family, he was good as the Bludgeon Brothers, but then when they let him go off on his own, you had that little sample of what that potential could be. Because he's a big guy, he's agile, he flies through the air, he's got great ring work, and most notably, when he went one-on-one with Randy Orton, you kind of thought that that was going to be the moment where Harper was going to get to the next level and finally have that push. But it didn't happen. Whether it was because Harper was injured or WWE Creative just didn't know how to use him, it just didn't seem as though Harper could get a break. But he still had lots of potential, and even when he was healthy and ready to come back, they had him set up always with Eric Rowan. Harper was never given that opportunity to just branch out on his own and show the world why this high-flying giant could actually do something spectacular in the ring. So let's just dive right in and talk about how AEW should debut Brodie Lee. Like I said before, I feel as though the March 18th AEW show in Rochester, New York is a great spot for Brodie Lee to debut because it's in his hometown and you're going to get a great reaction from the crowd. Though I feel as though his debut needs to be a little different than how other wrestlers are introduced and not have him make the save at the end of the show or be the mystery opponent. The way that Brodie Lee needs to debut in AEW is by having Sammy Guevara introduce him at the start of the show while the Inner Circle is cutting a promo. Just picture it. Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, Santana and Ortiz, Guevara, they're all in the center of the ring and they're cutting a typical Inner Circle promo. And Guevara stops Jericho for 1 second and says, "I got a surprise for you tonight, Chris, because I look up to you. You're my role model. You're the trendsetter. So tonight, I want to introduce to you Brodie Lee." And from the entrance ramp comes AEW's newest signee. Of course, Jericho's going to have a mixed feeling about this as he doesn't know why Guevara would bring someone like Lee into the Inner Circle. But Guevara has a good explanation for this. He says because of Jericho, how he breaks the molds and starts the trends, that he is le champion, that he wants to be just like Chris. And in doing so, he has asked Lee to be his bodyguard. Like Jericho brought in Hager, like MJF brought in Wardlow, Guevara is bringing us Lee. As Lee enters the ring, he stands there and Jericho just scopes him up and down, unsure how to take all of this. Guevara is super excited. Santana and Ortiz are just in the background reacting. All you can picture is Hager and Lee staring each other down. The two of them clearly are showing some minor tension already. Hager taps Jericho on the shoulder and whispers something in his ear, hoping that no one will hear it. But of course, Jericho being Jericho is oblivious and accidentally says on the microphone out loud, "What do you mean you don't like this guy?" From this, Jericho sells the idea of having two giants in the inner circle. You have Hagar, who's the muscle, and then he goes over to Lee and says, it's always nice to have a mechanic on staff. Jericho proceeds to call Lee the grease monkey of the inner circle and puts his hand on his shoulder. In doing so, it triggers Jericho to pull his hand back right away and fling it around in the air as though he's got some dirt on him. Jericho's panicking and starts wiping his hand on Hagar's shirt just to get the dirt off and play the whole gimmick up. While this is all happening, Lee hasn't looked at anyone other than Hagar. While Jericho is cleaning his hand on Hagar's shirt, he's just complaining as to why Lee has poor hygiene, and he questions what town he's from, how he was raised, and clearly wherever he was born is just filled with filthy grease monkeys just like him. Jericho turns around after complaining and Lee steps right in front of him. So now you have the image of Brodie Lee still staring at Jake Hagar and Chris Jericho with his nose in Lee's chest. Thinking that Lee is going to attack, Hagar steps in and you have Jericho sandwiched between the two big men. Guevara is then concerned how this is going to play out, so he tries to reason with Lee, but instead, Lee throws him aside, throws Jericho to the other side of the ring, and Hagar and Lee begin to brawl. Of course, just when you think the numbers are going to catch up to Lee, Santana and Ortiz go in for the attack. But instead, Lee blocks both of them and tosses them out of the ring, leaving just him and Hagar still alone, ready to face one-on-one. Jericho's cowering in the corner, and Guevara gets up to make sure his mentor's okay, runs over and checks on him. As Hagar and Lee go to face off, Jericho tells Guevara, get out there and do something about this. So Guevara runs and jumps on the back of Brodie Lee. Lee struggles with this as Guevara is flailing around on his back. Hagar hits a good punch to the gut, and Lee goes down. Jericho finally gets up from the ring and yells at Hagar and Guevara to bring Lee up so he can hit him with the Judas effect. Lee gets a second win and just throws Guevara right into Jericho, knocking them both down, turns to Hagar and hits him with a big boot, knocking him out. Santana and Ortiz make the save by pulling Jericho and Guevara out of the ring, making sure that the inner circle is out of harm's way. Lee is standing tall in the ring, grabs the microphone as the inner circle is heading up the ramp, calls out to them and says, I can fight any of you anytime I want, but I came to AEW to prove a point, and to do that, I need to take down the biggest guy in the ring. So I'm challenging you to a fight tonight. But before Hagar can even answer, Jericho answers for him and says, you're on, Lee. And to wrap this all up, Lee will go to Jericho and say, hey Chris, just for the record, I'm from Rochester, New York. Hopefully getting that hometown pop from the loud crowd. And this is how I feel AEW should debut Brodie Lee. It does a good job by introducing a character that a lot of fans are going to be familiar with, but not giving him that WWE guy feel. By having Chris Jericho do all the talking and Lee do all the focusing on Jake Hagar, it makes it so that Lee, who isn't that strong in his promos, come off as a stronger character by attacking the inner circle, who have been dominating AEW for some time. It also gives Jake Hagar a chance to have a real opponent, because up until now, you haven't really seen Hagar fight anybody. And instead of having Lee just come out and take someone on who's half his size, despite that showing off that he can hold his own and is a good wrestler, it'd be nice to have that big man match that AEW doesn't necessarily get week after week. And that's how I would book it. Thanks for watching, like the video, and comment below with your thoughts on how Brodie Lee should be booked in his AEW debut. And if this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel to stay updated with everything we're doing here on the Midcard Maniacs.